South Korea is hosting the third Inter-Korean Summit this year. A lot is at stake here for South Korea. What does the government of President Moon Jae and Kim Jong-un hope to achieve from his talks? WION's Ramesh Ramachandran finds out.
The success or failure of the Inter-Korean Summit will have huge implications for the region and the world at large. Now, I spoke to Ambassador Cho Tae-yong, a former Deputy National Security Advisor of South Korea, and I began by asking him about his expectations from the summit.
So far, North Korea did not make any public statements directly about the nuclear issue while talking about all other issues. So even when the leader Kim Jong-un visited China, North Korean media reported all other aspects of the visit in such a big way for 3 consecutive days, but didn't say a word about the nuclear issue. And this is not a good thing for the situation on the Korean Peninsula. So I hope that North Korea will come up to the Inter-Korean Summit with a reasonable and acceptable positions on the nuclear issue. And that will be a good preparations for the meeting between President Trump and Chairman Kim as well.
Kim Jong-un has decided to suspend all further nuclear and missile tests. It could be a good starting point, but will South Korea insist on complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization? Listen in.
We call it complete denuclearization of the North Korean nuclear problem, and that should remain the fundamental goal. But to begin with withholding the tests of nuclear weapons and the test of missiles in itself is a good starting point, but only a starting point.
After the Inter-Korean Summit, the focus will shift to the next big meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Will these two men get along?
We are talking about a first unprecedented summit between US and North Korea. And we are talking about a meeting between 2, admittedly, rather unpredictable leaders. So perhaps it's not good for anyone to predict what's going to come out of this meeting. But
Ambassador Cho says that the risks and consequences of failure are high.
Of the Korean Peninsula. So I hope that North Korea will come to the meeting with a good, solid position on the nuclear issue, addressing the legitimate concerns of the international community. And I hope that U.S. also will approach the summit with open mind.
The talks between Moon Jae-in, Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump can potentially alter the course of history on the Korean Peninsula. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran in Seoul for WION.
And India will be closely watching developments on the Korean Peninsula. India is heavily invested in the Indo-Pacific region, and the success or failure of the peace talks will have implications for it. Don't forget, India has embassies in Seoul and Pyongyang, putting it in a unique position to nudge both the sides towards peace. WION's Ramesh Ramachandran gets you more.
What is India's position on the Korean crisis? Does India have a position at all? I spoke to India's ambassador to South Korea, Vikram Doraiswamy, and began by asking him about the much talked about issue of denuclearization.
While we have a clear position in opposition to North Korea's nuclear and WMD delivery systems programs, we are also not in favor of any sort of precipitate means of getting rid of those weapons.
Now, India has had a long history of association and involvement in Korean affairs since the early 1950s. An Indian diplomat, KPS Menon, chaired the United Nations Commission, which was formed to oversee elections in undivided Korea. And after the Korean War from 1950 to 53, both warring sides accepted a resolution sponsored by India. And after the agreement, the armistice agreement was signed on 27 July 1953, Lieutenant General Themaya came to chair the Neutral Nations Repatriation Commission, which oversaw humanitarian relief operations.
So the dialogue route is obviously the best way forward, and we are, in that sense, supportive of anything positive that might come out of this upcoming series of summits.
The ambassador says proliferation linkages between North Korea and some countries in India's immediate neighborhood, such as Pakistan, are another cause for concern. Listen in.
There is also a third part, which is, of course, that the security challenge, if you will, emerging from North Korea's development and access to technologies relating to weapons of mass destruction and their delivery systems has a direct connection with our own region. Right. And that proliferation trail has been of great concern to us, and something that makes it more than just a theoretical challenge for us. It is something that has very practical, very direct, very immediate concerns to India.
Remember, India is only a handful of countries which has diplomatic missions both in Seoul and in Pyongyang. And that, as India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj told her then-American counterpart Rex Tillerson, may come in handy for the US to keep the channels of communication open between the West and Kim Jong-un. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran in Seoul for WION.
And will the much-anticipated summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un succeed? What will be the cause of the failure? And can Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un get along? What is Washington's position on some contentious issues such as denuclearization? WION's Ramesh Ramachandran gets you the American perspective. Take a listen in.
The Donald Trump-Kim Jong-un summit will be historic in every sense of the word. The young, brash and sometimes reckless Kim Jong-un enters history books as the first North Korean leader to set foot on South Korean soil in 6 decades. And Donald Trump becomes the first sitting American president to meet a North Korean leader. But these are two very unpredictable, temperamental, unorthodox, unconventional and non-conformist politicians. So will these two people hit it off? Is Kim serious about peace? Also, is there a method to Kim's so-called madness? I asked Mark Lippert, a former US ambassador to South Korea, and this is what he had to say.
My personal view has been that I've always felt he's rational. I think the jury is still out on how he perceives the world around him, what he perceives the United States, China, others. And I think the jury's still out in terms of how smart he is diplomatically. In other words, there have been moments, 2015, I would argue, with the aborted Moscow summit, other episodes where he did not take the Park Geun-hye government up on potential negotiations, did not take President Barack Obama up on his offers, where he's probably missed opportunities to divide a pretty serious coalition that's aligned against him. On the other hand, one could argue that he's perhaps saving up all of his big chips for a big negotiation. So I think this is really, again, one of the tests coming up between both the Inter-Korean summit forthcoming and the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Is there a grand bargain on the horizon, like giving up nuclear weapons and getting security guarantees in return to ensure that Kim Jong-un remains in power for a long time to come and does not end up becoming another Muammar Gaddafi? Listen in.
Hard to speculate on this. I think, again, this is part of the test. I would, if he says yes, then, obviously, as the Trump administration has said, the sky's the limit. But I think the question is, always the North Koreans have held a very murky definition of denuclearization that often involves giving up the U.S. nuclear security guarantees, the nuclear umbrella out here, possible withdrawal of U.S. troops. So I think really what we're focused on and should be focused on is what is his definition of denuclearization and how far, how fast will he be willing to go.
So what will it take to resolve the Korean crisis?
This isn't just a bilateral problem or issue. This isn't just an inter-Korean issue. It's a regional issue and one, quite frankly, with global implications. The Security Council's deeply involved, both in terms of the armistice and as well as the sanctions. So I think the real question to me is what is going to come out of these two summits. I think then we can talk about how you construct the other regional actors into a process and how you bring in the international players with the Security Council. But I think, the fundamental issues here are inter-Korean talks at first and then seeing where the U.S. is.
Clearly, there are more than two parties to the dispute. There are South and North Korea and the U.S., and then there is China. So the road to peace on the Korean Peninsula will pass through Beijing. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran in Seoul for WION.